Hey, good morning. You said not one person was stolen. They were sold by their own leaders. Don't race bait if you're gonna use disinformation. Well, Brock Childers 87, I can clearly see that your Alabaster, Alabama education has failed you. So come here real quick. Let's have a conversation. First and foremost, I'm gonna need you to stop lying. You are far too old for that. Stop it. Secondly, the lies you're telling were started by a racist cloister of Karens known as the United Daughters of Confederacy. Their job was to spread mis- and disinformation about slavery in the United States of America. They lied and rewrote history books, making sure that they favored the South and protected racists. You, racists, and many disinformed people say that nobody was stolen from Africa. While history says this: Sir Admiral John Hawkins hijacked a Portuguese slave ship and sold 300 Africans from it. And on his second trip, he captured 400 Africans. He didn't buy them, he didn't purchase them, and he didn't trade for them. He captured them. And when he finished, he wrote a book titled An Alliance to Raid for Slaves. And in this book, he tells the story of the very first Africans they captured, kidnapped, and stole. He writes in his book, I went myself, where we took 250 persons, men, women, and children. He said nothing about buying them, not purchasing them, not trading them. He said we took 250 people. And in total, there were 600 prisoners. And yet here you are, just loud, proud, and wrong, declaring that nobody was stolen. You then go on to say that they were sold by their own leaders, and that too is false. Africa has the highest form of genetic diversity on the planet. Before white people showed up, there was no, we are all Africans, we are all black. No, they were different ethnicities, much like you Europeans were. How you British were different from the Normans, who were different from the Irish, who were different from the Scots, who were different from the Celts, who were different from the French, who were different from the Germans, who were different from the Gauls. You see how that works? You see how different ethnicities work in Europe? It works the same way in Africa. It works the same way in Africa. And just like in Europe, white men were the ones who were fueling these conflicts between different ethnicities. So in warfare, when one kingdom conquers another, their prisoners of war were enslaved. These African kings didn't enslave their own people. They enslaved their enemies. You then go on to say, don't race bait if you're going to use disinformation. See, I don't think you understand what race baiting is, because if you did, you would know that your misinformation is intentionally encouraging racism or anger about issues relating to race. The lies that you and people like you tell prevent this nation from healing by stopping the truth from being told. You know people believe a lie faster than they believe the truth. I mean, you're a prime example, right? You then go on to say that they were promised land and a mule in 1865. And that's true. We were promised 40 acres and a mule. Did we get it? No. You want to know why? Because Andrew Johnson overturned the order in the fall of 1865. He gave all that land back to the racist, to the very people who declared war on the United States of America. You then go on to say that the first slaves to leave Africa to America was 1526, and that ain't true either. Because it was 1501 when Spain began trafficking enslaved Africans to the New World. You too old to be doing all that damn lying. It was 1526 when Spain landed in what would become the United States of America. Now, was I talking about Spain or Spanish colonies in that video? No, I was not. I was talking about Britain and British colonies around the world, specifically British colonial America. And I said that several times throughout the video, and at least twice within the first 10 seconds. And as stated in the video, it was August 20th, 1619, when Africans first landed in British colonial America. It's clear that your UDC education hasn't taught you that America started out as colonies of Spain, France, England, and the Dutch. Those are 4 separate countries that colonized indigenous land. And each one of those colonies had a different slave policy. So when you said they never promised them anything, you're partially correct, because Spain never promised their enslaved Africans anything. But Britain, however, Britain promised their indentured servants their freedom and land. And what was Point Comfort? It was a British colony. So am I saying that no Africans were ever bought and sold during the entirety of the transatlantic slave trade? No, that's stupid. We know that some were bought and sold. But for you to say that none were stolen, that is stupid. So why is that belief stupid? Because apologists for the African slave trade long argued that European traders did not enslave anyone. They simply purchased Africans who'd already been enslaved and otherwise would have been put to death. Thus, apologists like you, sir, claimed the slave trade actually saved lives. Such claims represent a gross distortion of the facts. Some independent slave merchants did, in fact, stage raids on unprotected African villages, as we have shown previously in the video, as well as kidnap and enslave Africans. And most professional slave traders, however, they set up bases along the West African coast where they could purchase slaves from Africans in exchange for firearms and other goods. But before the end of the 17th century, England, France, Denmark, Holland, and Portugal had all established slave trading posts on the West African coast. And why'd they do that? Because of a little thing called supply and demand. You see, Europeans wanted everything that came from Africa, from the soil to the people, to the water, to the mineral. Everything that came from Africa, Europeans wanted it. And all Africans wanted in exchange were weapons so that they could defend themselves from their enemies. And with European help, many African kingdoms were able to defend themselves against their enemies, at the same time providing Europeans with slaves, with bodies, with human capital. So, the next time you decide to open your mouth on the internet, make sure your facts are straight, because you don't need my help making you look stupid. Now have the day you were meant to have.